Xylouris White is a duo consisting of esteemed Cretan folk musician Yorgos Xylouris and the prolific in-demand drummer Jim White, who originally hails from Australia and is a member of Dirty Three. Over the past 5 years, George and Jim have been recording their wholly original music in New York with Guy Picciotto, a musician and producer who's a member of the band Fugazi from Washington, D.C. After 2014's Goats and 2016's Black Peak, Bella Union released the third Xylouris White record on January 19th, 2018. The album is called Mother, and it's another stunning and heartbreaking and inspiring record from this one-in-a-million union. Guy and I had an extensive conversation about Mother while he was in Brooklyn, and then, a little while later, as Jim was in Australia and George was in Crete, we too connected for a talk about this collaborative friendship, the filmmaker Jem Cohen, the reclusive musician Mary Margaret O'Hara, every song on Mother, and much more. With in-kind support from Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, and Planet of Sound locations in Ottawa and Toronto, and of course, flexible monthly pledges by listeners like you at patreon.com/Creative Control. This is the 400th episode of Creative Control, featuring Guy Picciotto and Xylouris White, with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Jim, can you talk about how your collaboration between you and George and Guy actually began? Why did you two start working with Guy, per se?
Oh, well, from a personal point of view, I mean, I had met Guy somewhere along the way before through Touch and Go people.
I met Jim when he was in Dirty Three, I think actually at the Touch and Go offices. Like, Fugazi had been on tour, and we were sleeping on the floor at Corey's office, and the Dirty Three guys, I think, had just recently signed to Touch and Go. So they came through the office to say hi, and we were all, I think just getting out of our sleeping bags or whatever, and we just hung out with them. That was the first time I think I'd ever seen Jim prior to even ever seeing Dirty Three play. So I met him around then, and then over the years, certainly saw them play a bunch of shows. And at one point, Vic Chestnut, when I was on tour with him, we played a show with Dirty Three over in Europe and kind of renewed communication at that point. And then the friendship really established itself when I moved to Brooklyn from D.C., which I did in 2010.
I met Guy, I know Jem Cohen for a long time, just from Jem coming to shows and actually having a lot of mutual music likes, especially Mary Margaret O'Hara. But then on September 11th, 2011, that Jem was arranging a sort of a renegade film and music performance in an abandoned drive-in, and he asked Guy and I to do something.
It was actually, there was this event where these people had basically broken into a drive-in movie theater that was in this Hasidic community up in upstate New York, and they'd go in around like midnight and then just project films on this giant screen, and people would just show up, and it was totally, underground or whatever. And then, bands would set up with a generator and then play music to the films that were playing on this giant drive-in screen. And that was the first time Jim and I actually played together. We just did some improvisations, guitar and drums to these films. And then after that, we worked together scoring some movies for Jem, a movie called We Have an Anchor. And we ended up just doing a bunch of projects together over the years, doing sessions and just getting to know each other that way.
When George and I, actually, the very first show we ever played was in not so far from Guy's house, and Guy came down.
And when he started playing with George, and I went and saw them play one of their first shows in New York City, and then the next day I said, why don't you just come to my house and we'll try tracking some stuff.
He's got a studio in his basement, and we were looking at recording a single for something. There was like a reason for, like, we'd been recording in the studio in Queens, then we went and did that with Guy, and then it just developed from there. The
very first day they came over and tracked stuff, we got all this incredible material, and it just was such a fruitful experience, I think. And some of those songs ended up on the first record, and we just, from that point on, anytime that they were in New York together at the same time, we just would do sessions here at the house. And we've collected, literally, I think I would say over 100, 200 pieces of music over the time period that I've known them and worked with them. They just come and record enormous amounts of stuff here in other studios elsewhere, and we just kind of collect these giant grab bags of material, and then the process of making the records is to work through the material and start assembling it.
And George, were you very familiar with Guy's work before you were introduced to him by Jim?
Not really. I didn't know Guy before, and I met him then when Jim said before we played. We had that was our first show with Xylouris White in a small venue bar in Brooklyn, and Guy came there, and I met him there. And as Jim said, we record some stuff at his basement, and that the first day I met him there at his studio, home studio there at his basement. I find out that Guy had that very special, nice way to contact and make comments and talk about the stuff we were recording at that time. And soon later, after through the music and his words, I find out how, he become the main character of the Xylouris White sound, really. Guy is there all the time. And
Jim, George says that Guy is now the main character in some ways in the Xylouris White sound. Can you expand upon that? What does Guy bring to your collaboration that seems special to you?
Like, he brings so many things. Like, I like the way, like, his recording style I like a lot. His idea. He and I pretty mesh a lot on decisions about sound and things like that. And he's super positive, and but he's got a great ear. He's got a great ear for arrangements, for grooves, and for parts. He can zone in quickly in a great way, like a way that's very easy to work with, like clear thinking, and but it's not it's not an ego thing or anything. It's just like, and he's just I don't know. I talk to him all the time about many decisions extra to do with Xylouris White. We talk about a lot of things, musical and non-musical, So it's just, I feel like it's a three-way collaboration, really.
Every time, I don't produce a lot of records, and I don't consider myself like a super well-trained engineer or whatever. But what I really, working with them, I feel like just a lot of trust from them and comfort. Like, not everything that we track is recorded in my own studio, but I would say the bulk of it is. And then on occasion we'll go to other studios if we need to do things that are louder or require things that I don't have here at my space. But in my studio, I don't have a control room, so I'm just sitting. There's no separation between me and them, so we're all just sitting in the triangle while I'm tracking. So there's the communication between the three of us is just very open. It's not me clicking on a talkback mic to discuss a sound issue or an arrangement issue. It's just the three of us talking together, and they're just very, very receptive to feedback and ideas about moving things around or extending things or changing shapes and all that kind of stuff. So I think we've just kind of created a partnership or a friendship that's made it very easy for the three of us to work together in a way that is, I don't know, it's been unique in my experience to be. It feels very similar to having an instrument in my hand, but I don't actually. I'm just like, but there's a feeling of that kind of sharing or whatever. It's awesome for me. It's really awesome.
He mentioned a day that you guys got together, and you were just, the two of you in particular, you and George, Jim, were in this zone where you were improvising and you were playing, and he recorded all of it, and he couldn't believe it. And that he was saying that even, we're on your third record now, a lot of the material that came about on that one day is still stuff you're working on and still stuff you're drawing from. Is that your recollection, Jim?
Yeah, there was a sort of a certain tuning that George had, and a certain, when the microphones were, hit the spot, and we were in the good zone of like improvising, I guess. Really being really quick. We're pretty quick in the studio anyway, like moving through ideas, and yeah, that's something we've drawn on at different times through the records. Yeah, for sure. The thing is, we've recorded. There was some request for some song early on that we had while we went there that first day after the show, and then we only had, I think, a few days before George had to go back, and we did I'm not sure how many days we did, and then I can't really remember the order of how it all went, but we've recorded in Guy's house many days, and there's many songs stockpiled, or whatever you want to call it, The other thing about Guy is Guy's also meticulous at he's a good record keeper, and he knows what's there, you know what I mean, and he'll go back and find stuff. But so yeah, so we actually made an album playlist that we never put out of some stuff from that period, that early period, and instead we've just drawn some different songs at different times, yeah, and we've gone back and maybe we've augmented them, or sometimes just put them on as they are.
Everything about the way the group works is a complicated combination of elements, I think. They're working often from pure improvisation, or not often. I would say one mode of working is based on pure improvisation, and there's songs on this record that came out of that. There's other ones that are based on traditional Cretan melodies and rhythms, and then they're kind of put through the filter of the band itself and the way they work on those things. And then there's some things which are a combination of both elements. And then there's also just completely new compositions that are arranged as what you would think of as arranging a traditional song if you were writing one from the ground up. So there's all these different modes of working, and most of the songs have elements of all of that.
So what we do is we sort of find a direction for a new album, we sort of try and find out what it is. I feel like with Xylouris White, it's as soon as we started playing, it was like this expanse, you could just see so many ways of doing things, so many, I don't know, you could call them albums if you wanted to, or ideas. And, then we have to start somewhere, so, mark some ground, and then we find the nature of we do some sessions, and we tend to record a lot. We go to Guy's whenever we can. Sometimes we go in the studios in different places when we're traveling. And, the three of us, we discuss and find the nature of the album, what we want it to be and what it is. And then we'll throw other songs, we'll talk about other songs that, which either recorded or not recorded, There could be contenders for that.
Okay, well, I think that's a good enough context for me in terms of why you work with Guy, and it makes sense since he's hoarding all your material. You have to go back and see him. He's got it all there, so I think I think I understand the nature of the collaboration. Are you ready to kind of talk about each of the songs in some respects? I'm just going to ask a few questions about each of them, and
I'll just add something in about that with Guy. I remember now that one way that he and I got to know each other was we did this thing called We Have an Anchor. I'm not sure if you mentioned that.
Well, yes, and that's where you and I first met, Jim. I saw the 2 Toronto shows.
With Mary, yeah.
Yes, and the first night, I feel like I remember Mary being different on both nights. I can't remember which was which, but one she seemed more comfortable than the other, as I recall.
As she is, yeah. One where she opened up more and improvised more.
I feel it was the second night she improvised more. That's right. I think the first night she was more cautious, and then the second night was magical. It was unbelievable. Yeah. Yes.
So we got to know each other through that, and that's actually led also to George and Guy and I. That one was with some of the Montreal people, Todd from New York, and Ephraim and Jessica and Sophie from the Montreal people, the Godspeed, Silver Mountain Zion, and then that actually, and now George and Guy and I, we do another program with Jem on occasion.
let's go through the songs a little bit. I want to begin with In Medias Res.
Are you familiar with the term in medias res, what it means?
Yes, it means to begin a story kind of midstream or something, like a narrative midstream. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's like they refer to, like when they talk about the Iliad or like old things like that, they sometimes talk about like just jumping into the action or whatever. And that was the title that occurred to me when I heard the music, and I was like, oh my God, that's so what this is. And it's one of my favorite things that is on the record. It's because it's very, very different from a lot of the stuff that they've done. It feels like these sheets of sound, and it was constructed in a really strange way. Like, I think the original root of that was George playing a series of cellos as if they were lutes. So we knew it as cello lauta, which is like cello lute. That was kind of the working title for it.
Well, that song, it was a sound I had from some years ago, which I wanted to make an instrument with 4 strings sound like 40 strings. And I was doing that arpeggio, as we say, on my fingers, on the lute strings, and tried to make it like caterpillar, go up and down, and feels like I had more than 5 fingers in one hand, thinking about the legs of a creature.
So the bass was a recording of George back in Crete, recording with these cellos. And then at some point he recorded a lira, which is like a bowed instrument. He recorded it on his cell phone while he was listening to the piece. So, and the quality of that for some reason just sounded so beautiful that we just used the recording from his cell phone as the additional element there.
When I started recording that, it was straight into the go, press rec and go straight there, don't muck around, go like that. That thing, and that was something was following me a long time, until we put it down with Jim and we had a listen, and we thought that's a really something we want to work on it, and we did that with Guy in a studio, and after we had listen and again, we put down some of Jim's feelings and we try things.
And then we took that material and did a bunch of different ideas on drums at this studio called Trout Studios. We went in with, and we played that bass material, and then had Jim play like train rhythms and open rhythms and all these different. We did like, I think, 7 passes of drum ideas, like different ones, and there was one that was like really free that just ended up, I don't know, it just really lifted the piece, and that was the one we ended up using. But that one was like recorded, in multiple installments in different media and ways, like, including a cell phone, and it became something about the rough mix of that. It just was the song. It was done, it just sounded perfect to us. So I feel like it's definitely one of the most interesting things I think they've ever recorded, and one that I had probably the least to do with, but just kills me. I love that song.
Jim went into the point, straight into the point, without saying, details about it. Just listen the sound. It was something really was following me, and it was something like following us with Jim, with before Xylouris White. So I put the lira on the top, and lira, it was it's like a conversation of the Yeah, it's a conversation really, from into the point, drums and arpeggio, and lira is like trying to find the solution between these two. And also the first song is a big part of the record of the mother, the mother of the meaning, because the idea, as an idea, gave us the opportunity to play our instruments, which is the mother of the first pieces. Is the sound was there already, and gave us the opportunity, gave us the milk, which is the opportunity to play with our instruments, which are our toys in a way.
Okay, we move on to Only Love. Which I believe I saw you play in Guelph at the Kazoo Festival, and I feel that way because I remember thinking it stuck out from some of your previous material. From my vantage point, it's a more upbeat song. It has almost a rock song structure. The beat is more of a rock beat, I would say, and I thought the arrangement was more in that vein of kind of like a rock song. Jim, can you talk a little bit about where Only Love came from exactly?
I don't think we did play it there, but
okay. I feel like I feel like I've seen it played because I remember being like, oh, that's interesting.
Well, I think it's interesting for people outside of the process of working on it. I think people see the records as being like kind of, they see an evolutionary narrative where there's like, okay, there's the first record and they establish something, and then the second record and the third. Because of the way we record and the way so much of the making of the record is in actually the song selection and the sequencing. Some of the stuff that's on the newest record is stuff that we recorded at the very beginning, and some of it is brand new. And so it's, instead of being like a linear line, it's more like kind of an oscillating spiral of like returning to old ideas and then pushing new ideas forward. And each record is kind of constructed with an intent and an idea. Like the first record was mostly instrumental, and then had one song with vocals on it, and which kind of led to the next record, which was predominantly vocals. And then we started introducing the element of additional, or they started introducing the element of additional instrumentation and voices and stuff. And then the third record has continued that, where it's like more instrumentation, more arrangement, but a lot of that was kind of intentional in the way that we sequenced and constructed the records. But not all of the material in this new record, predominantly most of it is new material, but some of the stuff is stuff that we had basic tracks for a very long time, and that needed time for us to figure out ways to use them or ways to add to them with overdubbing and reconstructing from that perspective. A lot of these songs, like say like Only Love, for example, that's a song that we've recorded, I don't know, maybe 15 versions of it with different arrangements and different ideas. And the funny thing about that song is it came out of a session where we said like, hey, let's record a bunch of ringtones. So we recorded these 12-second, like when you called me, my ringtone is a Xylouris White home recorded ringtone that we created ourselves, and they did here at the house. And you want to hear what it sounds like?
Sure.
All right. This is one sec. Let me dial it up here. But
Wow.
Could you hear that?
I could hear that. Yes, it sounds that's a remarkable ringtone, if I might say.
It's really enjoyable. So that day we were recording all these ringtones, and we recorded like, I don't know, 7 or 8 of them, and like one would be really melancholy, the other one would be like, this is what it should sound like when your mother calls. This one, we had them very specific kind of, they had ideas for, the kind of the vibe of each one. And then they did this one that sounded, I called it the anthill ringtone because it had this crazy like bug-like energy to it. And I was like, that's an incredible part. And then I was like, maybe we should try to put that into an arrangement. And George had been working on this other song, which I didn't even realize. He changed the tempo and changed some things about it and attached this ringtone thing to it. And then that was the kind of the gestation of what became Only Love. And it became something that we worked through like many, many cycles of arranging it until it became this kind of compact rock thing that it is now. But that was the way it started. So we had multiple versions of that.
Only Love, that was something we did before in Athens with Koti in some point.
Oh, that's right. We did it a different way.
Yeah.
Guy actually mentions that he believes, according to his notes, there are may have been 15 different versions of this song before the one that exists on this record.
So maybe you're right too about the Guelph, maybe because I forgot that we were doing it in a different way. And we did it up in Columbus Theatre too, right, George?
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah.
it just has evolved into...
I mean, I think it's probably more of a rock beat song than pretty much I can remember doing ever, in the beat. But yeah, just it developed with the arrangement, as that changed from the other versions, It seemed like a nice combination in the sort of order of the album, sort of coming in hard like that after the first one.
George, I want to ask you about the words of the song. I have the English translation in front of me. I only gave love to this false world, and my repayment was, if you have more, give me it. Can you talk about the lyrics in this piece?
This piece is a kind of sirto, which is a dance of Crete. It's a sirto. The lyrics come from here in Heraklion few years ago, some years ago, and become from that poet Giorgos Stavrakaki. At that point we were together and we were take a part of a recording in a record here, somebody's in Heraklion, and he turned around to me and he said those lyrics because we became together waiting to go to the studio, and I was telling him how much worried I was, and he knew how much work I had put on that record, but nobody was happy enough with that what we were giving to the sound where we were doing at that point, and he turned around and he said that to me. And I thought, the following days, I took that, I was inspired because the feeling of the time, and I put some, some music on that lyrics, but it wasn't completely different to what it was same time similar and completely different what we come out with Mother after all this time, and the lyrics can be like that, like you want to, all the people around you, to be happy and work together and make something together, but all the time something there gives you the disappointment and find out after all this what you're doing, you have to give more and more and more just to keep it rolling. So that was inspired to me at that time, and then I find out that is what you have to do. I mean, you need to do that and try hard and hard, to be out there and contact and be with people. But really, I'm not compliant because I'm going to give more love and more of my feelings and soul, to this world. But remind me the same time, that's what I need to do for the people and for me.
We move on to a song called Motorcycle Condilius. This is a longer piece on this record. The last record featured a song called Pretty Condilius. Do you know if there's some relation between the two?
Yeah, the Condilius is it's a traditional melody and form that has many different iterations rhythmically and many different ways to approach it.
Condilius is like Sirto, we said before. There are many Sirto and there are many Condilius. Condilius comes from that type of the way you play the phrases and the dance, of course, which is a slow dance. But Condilius is the way you put, one Condilia, one phrase, and then Condilius is the way you put Condilia to Condilia and make Condilius. And there are Condilius all across the whole village of Crete.
What's interesting about this version is that we had come up with a plan to create this kind of like Bohemian Rhapsody Condilius, which was going to be just this massive construction of these rhythms. It was just a massive arrangement, which was going to be like almost like a Britannica of Condilius rhythms and melodies. And we recorded, I think, 14 different Condilius with very specific, very looped, like normally Jim doesn't, we don't sit on a looped type rhythm idea. Generally the ideas are rhythmically are moving around and the drums are exploring. But this time we very specifically had defined rhythm patterns for each of the 14 and different lute patterns for each of the 14. And then we were going to find some way to record it as one massive epic history vision of the Condilius, but we never got past the stage of just articulating what each of the 14 was. And when we tried to connect them all, it became very, very difficult to do as an executed arrangement idea. So, but this one particular one, it just, the rhythm on it, it reminded me of this rhythm on that Prince song Kiss. For some reason that just, I'm not sure they're even that linked, but for some reason it had this, the groove of it was just, I just couldn't get it out of my head. And it just, the swing of that drum pattern it was just a narcotic to me. Like I just couldn't get away from it.
I know that song, yeah, of course. I had it,
It's like, can you hear that?
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah. You play that one?
Yeah, I have played that one. I have had to play that song in some configuration relatively recently. Yes, and it's a hypnotic beat.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I can understand what it. So we were playing this song. We were like playing, the Condilius, as I understand it, the Condilius from Neue has many parts, and we were like sort of. We were going through these parts and we really focused in on this. We were looking at it as a whole, like looking to see what it was, and then we really focused in on this part. And Guy heard me doing that beat, and he really was like, he really loved it, and he mentioned that reference. I don't know to the actual. I don't think it's actual same syncopation, but the feeling of it, I think. And I was watching Guy. He was moving around at the desk. You know what I mean? So I was like, yeah, that's got to be a good one.
The feeling that George put into that version, which was really just a practice tape. Like, we set up in the studio, but I wasn't really engineering it for any kind of posterity or thinking about it necessarily as like a finished track. It was more as a guidepost to this larger idea that we had.
Right.
But George just hit the vocal so exuberantly and the playing was so exuberant. And then the piece just they could have played it for 28 minutes or 36 minutes. They could have played it forever, and it would have had. It just was so, to me, so intoxicating, and it's a very, very long piece, but it never feels long to me when I listen to it because of just the energy and the flow of that piece. So we ended up just singling that one out and having it be a song on its own.
I remember times back in early 80s, late 70s here in Heraklion. I was with my cousins and we had motorbikes, and I was on a motorbike. I was sitting in the back, and my cousins, every time we went with the ride, go around with the motorbikes, we were sing those phrases and sing on it and improvise lyrics. So it's a really another piece which is following us all our life, and we put it down and try to develop on those phrases.
The feeling. I do want to ask about that feeling, George, because the last two verses intrigue me in English. Stubborn me, stubborn you. You're being stubborn, girl. You won't give up unless you drive me crazy. All I have is a heart and a motorcycle, and I'll give you both if you promise to go straight. It's a romantic song. It's a frustrated song. It seems to be about the kind of frustration about being in love and how it can be. There's a certain amount of insanity involved, I think.
Yes. Simple and sensitive and strong. Yeah.
Anything more you want to say? I know you were consulting your notes. Anything more you want to say about this song?
Let me take a look here to that page.
Do you always take notes when you're making a record?
Well, with these guys, I have to take meticulous notes because I'm literally looking at 5 or 6 different composition books that are filled from front to back with notes from sessions. Because, like I said, there's literally on an average day, we'll be tracking, and we may track 23 pieces of music. And if I'm not taking notes about what's going on with each one, then there's just not going to be any way for me to go back and find things or reference what we were working on or what the intent or ideas behind each of the pieces was. And so I really try to keep a lot of notes as it's going on. And also sometimes just to help me think of, a lot of times when they're improvisations, just to have something that gives us an idea of what just scraps of things that they're saying or whatever that might lead to titles for the songs or other things. So it's like just a way to kind of focus in on what's happening. Yeah, because for example, they might do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 versions of a song, but if you don't, in the moment, I can be saying like this one had this one felt like it was the superior one. Then it just kind of finesses the moment when you have to go back through all the material and find out what's worth exploring.
Yeah, has this impacted how you work with a band that's coming in with, say, 10 songs to record?
Well, I always keep notes, but these guys, it's a much different. It's like really, it's much, much different. Yeah.
On to Spud's Garden, and this one begins relatively gently and just beautiful singing. George, I want to ask Jim first about George's singing, because we've gone from a place where you guys made a record where there was, I think, one song with a vocal, and now I can't imagine Xylouris White without George singing.
Well, obviously George is such a great singer, but when I first went to Crete I don't know, 4 or whatever years ago. We went and we were mucking around, and we were like in the studio, and George didn't sing at all, and we were, a lot of the times I was learning some of the. I mean, I know the melodies of the music already, of some of the traditional tunes already, because the sort of melodic structure from listening to it without thinking about it, And then, I sort of liked the idea of actually having just a little bit of singing on the first one, and it also meant that it wasn't. Maybe this is stupid, but we weren't this Greek language band straight away, So it's sort of a natural thing, and also, we probably had more. It was nice to introduce that on the first one. But George's singing is fantastic, and it's an amazing instrument. But in Spud's Garden, it's got the beautiful when it goes so low at the end, and when it's like so resonant,
That is a song that I've heard them do from the very first time I've ever saw them play, and it's. That one was very well structured from the get-go, and I think it's based on a traditional thing that George has had with him for a while, and they have this version that they've been playing, and I've seen them play it live. I've seen them play it in relation to this very beautiful film that Jem Cohen made of it's basically just a train in motion. It's like a tracking shot following a train in motion, and they would play this song to that film, and the two just wedded together beautifully. So I always associate it with that film, and it's one that we've tracked in different ways, and then we actually deconstructed it at one point with a totally different rhythm that was very, very beautiful, and one that I hope that we revisit at another point. But this is the classic version of that song that we did, and the expansion on this record was to add those other elements, the mandolin and the lira, which George added in the studio as an overdub, and I think are just wonderful.
George, can you pinpoint, is there anything that has inspired you to sing more or explore your voice more in playing with Jim?
Oh yes, I explore the way I'm singing again with Jim a lot, different stuff coming out, and different stuff to what I usually do with my voice comes out. Because Jim and Guy support and force me to do through the way we rehearsal and try things, and now different ways opens to do with my voice. And Spud's Garden, it was one of these opportunities.
Μάλωσαμε τη σκέψη μου και τώρα ζούμε χώρια κι ούτε χαρά δεν έχω πλειό μα ούτε και στεναχώρια.
Gardens, it's a simple truth and real, natural sound. Spud is a dog, and really the melody become as we were looking a dog, going, a friend dog, a pet, which you've got long time together. And following around the garden.
I wondered who Spud was. I asked Guy about it, and it's interesting to hear that he is a dog, because the lyric is a short one, and I wondered whose perspective this was from. The lyric is, "I quarreled with my thoughts, and now we live apart. I now have joy no more, and yet no worry either. I'd like to know the years that pass if they die too, or go and live somewhere else." Is this the perspective of Spud the dog?
Yes, I'm wondering.
You're wondering if this is what's going on in Spud's mind as he's digging around a garden. Okay.
Exactly.
It's a serious, somber thing for a dog to be thinking, I think. We don't think of dogs as having such thoughts sometimes. Here in Canada, where I'm calling from, we think of dogs as being happy and, thinking of fun things. But this is a very somber, serious-minded dog, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course. Spud, it is a serious dog. Yeah, he's a serious, character.
We move on to Daphne, which I believe might be the first song featuring a person's name that I've heard in the catalog.
Μες στην καρδιά οι ρίζες σου.
Once we kind of got together to start sessions of new material for the new record, this is, I think, the first one that I think we started this one in December of 2016. And so we were just starting out and we had recorded a few things. But very early in the process, I think that by the 16th song, we tracked this version of Daphne. And that was the first time where I was like, okay, now there's something really deep happening in the session.
Daphne, it's a song which is a hymnos for mother. Because everybody has a mother, Mother Earth. At that moment, the Daphne, it's an old song, it's an original song which we play a long time now, many years, and it's a song which is, when I met Jim first in Australia, he was coming to see the band I was playing with back then in Melbourne, and that was one of our favorite songs we liked to play back then. And Daphne, it's one of the songs I can call mother again, because it gives me the opportunity to discover it again, and gives me, more music and more energy and more dynamics in a way which feels like you take more milk from and more energy to do stuff into something which is old and can be alive all this time.
Just the combination of his vocal and the piece and the mystery and the mood of it, it's one of the ones in my notebook where I just have a cascade of, I put stars next to things which I think are interesting, and this one just got starred to death, like a constellation of stars, because I was like, this one is just so beautiful. Yeah. And it was the first one where I was like, okay, I feel like there's new terrain or new feelings. There's something about this that's going to be very important for the record, and it's the original rough mix that I did when I sent it to them is the one that we ended up using on the record, just because everything that was there. Nothing, we didn't add anything. It just was done. It was just done that first day.
I'm reading the lyrics of Daphne, and I just noticed the last verse here, and I just want to ask you about it, George. I've never seen another's thought more stubborn than your own. I argue and banish it, but it wouldn't go away. This stubbornness has come up now twice. This reminds me of the motorcycle Condilius, where there's this notion of stubborn me, stubborn you. That's a frequent. It seems to come up a few times here. The dynamic between maybe a mother and a child, and maybe two lovers. This notion of stubbornness. Can you speak to that?
Well, the connection is that the way you put it. I haven't think about that, but I find the similarity there. which is very interesting, you know, exactly that, because mom is like that. She will never change anyhow. And the way, you know, we feel with music, you know, through this album, this sound, Mother, feels like that, you know, there is something which is around your mind all the time, and, you know, in the way as you're doing it, as that gives you new things, birth again and again, and you discover again, and they are not way to leave you. You know, that music, that's our mother. That's the, you know, Mother, the record is the egg of the two before, the two records before, you know, Goats and Black Pig, and the others they're going to, you know, following in the future. You know, I think is the egg which is completes and includes the time we have been working with Jim, and it's a change. It's a big change in this period that happens after all this time we be together and play around the world.
Jim, do you want to?
That makes sense.
It does make sense in a way. It sort of suggests a kind of reverse chronology, right? You're saying that Mother is the egg for the two albums that preceded it, which is fascinating. Jim, do you want to say anything more about that in that concept?
I was just thinking about this, and like, you know, from my point of view, I guess that makes sense to me in that when we started, I could see this big vista, you know what I mean? But then you have to start somewhere, and you have to plant your foot somewhere, like with Goats. And then, you know, Black Peak is like a lot to do with experiences of playing a lot of shows, traveling around, you know, and yet it's about the mountain in Crete and the horizon at the same time. And then Mother is kind of like, yeah, to me it goes back to that original idea, feeling that we had. So like it's like, you know, sort of both singular and expansive, you know what I mean? And opens a way further as well. And it's not just preconceived, it's like what's happening now, but it's also, it was intrinsic in there before as well, you know, or it's come true.
Yes, it's a new thing out of all these things, you know, out of all this time we played together, and you know, out of these two records before Mother, this is a different way. It glues, you know, gives you the picture what was before and what's going to gives you after. That's the feeling I have.
And then there's other songs like Achilles' Heel from the record, which was, there was one day back in December of 2013 where it just was the most productive they were just on an insane improvisational tear where they just were, I really don't know what was going on, but they would just look at each other and then just go into these like completely well-formed, amazingly structured, but purely improvised sections. And we've gone back to that one session multiple times to pull material from it because it's just, the engineering the sounds were really cool, but their playing was just, there was something going on with the playing that day. I don't know what it was, but Achilles' Heel, Call and Response, Pulling the Bricks, the first song on the first record. There's a ton of songs that came from this one session that was just it was just one of those weird moments where every single thing they threw against the wall like stuck and was usable and beautiful in a way that was like, and really just the material was coming from, not from traditional sources. It was just coming from them looking at each other and just going right into these things with no discussion. So Achilles Heel was always one that for every record I'd always be like, what about this song? Because I just loved the way it sounded so much. And then, but it always seemed like it needed another element. And this time George went and created this vocal for it. I mean, I didn't even know if it was possible to sing on the song. And he came back he went to Crete and he recorded something on top of it and sent it to us and was like, what do you think of this? And it just, to me, it was just so beautiful. And it really took the song into, you know, the next stage where it was definitely had to be on the record.
I don't know. For me, George. So this was an instrumental for a long time, and then George put that poetry on top, the lyrics. So that I mean, to me, that totally elevated it completely. But I did like it before. I mean, there's just a lot. You know, it wasn't that Guy just really was in on it. I guess I think that's the one.
It's in a slightly different tuning. The lute is a really interesting instrument in that the frets themselves are movable, so you can change. The frets are, you know, they're not like on a guitar where you have metal frets and they're just immovable, and that's what the guitar is. Like on the lute, you can move the frets around, and you can also, like you can with a guitar, you can play with alternate tunings. And George often uses different tunings, and there's this one tuning with a lower, I think it drops down to a D, I believe, on the top, which every time he plays something in that tuning, just the way that we have our mic set up here and the way there's some stuff that we do with acoustic lute matched with these two different guitar amps. Like when we create this sound by, you know, putting mics out of phase, and there's a certain sound that I can get with the lute in this tuning that is, for me, out of the material that we've worked on, there's a sound to the lute that feels like it's extra special, or it's extra like delicious for me for some reason. It's in that tuning. And this was one of the first times where I felt that extra deliciousness, where he was playing in that tuning on this day where they were just cranking out these sick improvs one after the other that were just so amazing. And like I said, I would always return back to this one every time for the last two records, and I would just be like, guys, check this fucking song out. And they liked it, but they were always like, maybe it needs this or that. But there's something about that tuning and the way it sounds coming out of the speakers that just, maybe it's subjective just for me, but I think it's just it does something to me that's very, very powerful.
I always liked it too, I think, but yeah.
It's interesting when three people are working on something and one of them is like over the moon right away, but the others, you know, it took something else. And George, Jim mentioned that when you added vocals, it really made the song work for him a little bit more. And the lyric here is, for me, the highest peak in the lands of the living is to be down low amongst the people. That's a very profound bit of poetry, actually. Can you speak to that, George, the meaning behind that, those lyrics for you?
I think this song is a story, and the lyrics Aristidis Heretis Yalaftis, he's a poet, he's a man from my village here, from Anoia. You know, those lyrics, I love those, you know, that couplet, long time now. I didn't know what lyrics on that piece, you know, when the instrument's talking, what other lyrics can go on that, and which way you could sing the lyrics. So I thought about that couplet, which I loved for a long time, and then I tried to put it on, you know, the way you sing a story, and put some singing notes in the ends of the words. And it was a difficult thing to do, but after all, you know, I find a way how to do it, and I really liked it, and I sent it back to Jim and Guy, and they loved it too. because the singing happened here in Crete, and I try a few things on it, and then we find out, with the same lyrics. I send it back a couple of times, and the third time I send it back to Guy and Jim to have a listen this one, which I liked a lot. They loved it too, and we keep that. And the way I sang, I think, and the lyrics of Aristide fits the story of the music.
When George took it away and came up with the idea for having a lyric attached to it, I just was so happy that it was able to come out, because it's always been one of the things that we've done together. It's just always been one of my favorites. And the thing I love about their improvisations is that, and I think Jim has some very interesting ideas that would be worth asking him about improvisation and the pitfalls of the term and the kind of nebulousness of what people do with it. But there's something very considered about their improvisations that feels extremely musical and not half-assed, in any way. Yeah. And this is an example of that, where they're just making music out of listening to each other in the moment that has elements of adventurousness or just exploring things, but also always with some shape, or some story inside it. And that's, to me, this song is like a perfect kind of distillation of that as an idea, as an approach to improvisation.
Okay, we're going to move on. We're almost done this exercise, and I appreciate your willingness to go through these pieces. We're going to move on to Woman from Anoia.
Κλάψε καημέ νιάνο Γιάννη το περιδό μητέρα να τρέξουνε τα δάμ να τρέξουνε τα δάκρυα σου.
Ριζίτικο.
So this is a Rizitico. So as I understand it, the style of song is like from people in the mountains, like maybe shepherds or something, singing by themselves, unaccompanied. We always play some of them in the show, and this is one that we actually haven't done. So we, like, some of them we've been doing for all the years and recording them many times over, and I think one day we'll get them and we'll have one, especially this one called Cold Rizitico. But this one is one we just did quickly in the studio.
A lot of my memory of this song has to do with the day that we tracked it. We had 3 days booked in a studio called Trout Studios where Only Love was recorded and a few other pieces for this record. And it was one of those situations where we were kind of like working on things, and then suddenly we realized we had like an hour left in the studio, and it was like this panic to like track like an enormous amount of material in the last hour that we had. Uh-huh. And there's one song called Proto Hanyati, which is, if there's a kind of a Moby Dick for the band, it's this song. It's a very old traditional piece that George has been working on for a very, very long time, and we've tracked it 50, 60 times, I don't know. In every studio that we go to, in every session that we do, we take a run at this song, and we knew that he wanted to try to throw in a couple of proto-Hanyatis before we got out of the studio, but before we did that, they just started banging out these Anoia songs. We did track 2 of them, one called Beautiful Mum and then one called Woman from Anoia, and they just did them back to back very, very quickly. And then we went in and slammed a bunch of versions of Proto Hanyati, which, chasing this this song that we didn't get.
The lyric I have in front of me is, "Cry, poor woman from Anoia, in motherhood let your tears run to become a river, walk slowly down to Hades to wash your wounds." It's, again, a rather dark and somber image. George, why did you want to bring that to a Xylouris White record? Does it fit with... I can see, obviously, where it fits within the theme, if there is a theme of mother. Obviously, this is one of the most direct references to that. Is there any particular reason why you wanted to bring this to a song that you and Jim would play?
It's not only the melody and the lyrics. I had the feeling at that time we recorded all this happening on the world. It was the moment I had the feeling to put them down, and try to put our sound into those lyrics, take it from the traditional way to put it in a Xylouris White sound. And the meaning of the lyrics, it was because all this happening on the world right now, we're talking. Take it from Anoia, which Anoia has been, during the centuries, has been bent down to the ground, 3 times from the wars, in the past. Every year in my village, they celebrate the freedom and the pain of the, people went through, or the wars. The wars happens right now, we're talking, and we're looking, to put our feelings and make it in sound. Our feelings, really, how we feel, how we take it and old thing the same time and make it new. And the old happens now and again, and why? And the mother is the one has, goes through this pain a lot, and that's the song is about.
Totally voice is the center of it, but I sort of think of the drums as like I think it's like the weather, you know what I mean? And so I sort of like, it's supporting what's going on with the words, the music, the melody rather, and but I kind of make some other story that's maybe more not atmospheric, but like something else going on, like its own story in the environment.
But then going back to the session and then hearing that woman from Anoia, and it just sounded so, I don't know, there was something that had just a quality, or like, it always blows my mind sometimes how, like, in the middle of a session, something can happen where there's so much pressure on in this, kind of practical way. Like you're in the middle of a real world situation where you're trying to get something to happen and you've got limited time and resources, and then something just happens anyway that's artistic and interesting and musical and beautiful, and that's what this song is to me.
Well, speaking of, I guess, sort of temperamental stuff, I want to move on to Call and Response, which is, I think, a moodier piece.
That was tracked as part of the epic December session that produced all these other improvisations. So that was I think it was the penultimate one of that day.
I think that speaks for itself, this song, really,
We had that one of those sessions which I had a little small idea, and we said, let's put something down, and it was, later on, Guy gave the name of the song Call and Response, and it was exactly like that, because I had the opportunity to start that little idea I had, and Jim was the drums respond straight away into it, and then become the opposite direction. And then, like, I was the response to Jim, what he was doing. And then we don't know who was response and who was call. And that was which I like a lot, the title of Guy's words. He said, call and response. Listen to this. I like it. And we did. Oh.
Like many of the other ones from the States, just like littered with my notations of just massive amounts of stars all around it because I loved it so much. And again, it's just it may be the kind of example of a communication between the drum and lute in an improvised mode where they're like, in a true call and response fashion where they're speaking to each other. So I think it's the most conversational of all the improvisations that we've done. And I mean, it's got a playfulness to it or whatever, a mischievousness or whatever, but it's also just wonderful sound and wonderful playing for both of them. So.
So the final song is Lullaby. It is a traditional piece. Jim, I want to begin because it features one additional musician here, Anna Roberts Gavalt. And based on what Guy was saying, she is someone you've collaborated with before, Jim. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. So she's someone... We met her down... George and I were playing at Big Ears, and we just met her there. She wasn't playing. She was just there, and then came to realise that she was in this band called Anna and Elizabeth, who's a kind of a Appalachian sort of based band and they do a lot of dancing from there, and they sing, and they're both great singers and musicians, play banjo and violin and viola and different things. So we actually, Xylouris White and Anna and Elizabeth have been talking since we met a couple of years ago about doing something together, we haven't like doing some shows together or something, which we haven't done yet, but in the meantime, they did actually ask me to play on their record, and I played on some songs. And then some of the songs on this record were done at the studio called Trout, near Guy's house and near my house. George and Guy and I wanted to go to another studio other than Guy's to do some songs, and so we went in there. And then later on, we wanted some string sounds on. Just wanted to try something, a lullaby, and send it to Anna, who was on tour, I think, at the time, and I think she may have done it in a hotel room somewhere. And she put that on, and we sorted that out.
It's a song that they've cut a few different times, and it was the last song on the last day of the session, and we had found a version of them doing a lullaby live that was just so beautiful. The vocal and the melancholy of it, and so I was just, always really hoping to get one that would work for the record. And we went back through the sessions and we found this one. And in the project that we were doing where we were syncing music with film, Jem Cohen had made this film which had footage of really, really beautiful footage of his newborn son. And we synced it with this music and performed it live. It was kind of like this symphony of guitar feedback and stuff. And then out of all of that came this lullaby with George singing it. And it kind of was just gorgeous, and then that kind of confirmed that the song really needed to come out, and it ended up fitting perfectly as a way to finish this record when we found that version again and just heard the way all the pieces lined together. It's like there's something about George's vocal on that that's very just, I don't know, it really is very touching.
Κοιμήσου κι αναγιώνουσε τρεις αδερφές κι η μάνα κι ακόμη δε σε φτάνουσι και θέλεις πάρα
George, can you talk about the meaning within this song, Lullaby? Again, it seems like a very appropriate ending to a record called Mother, but can you talk a little bit about this song?
Yeah, Lullaby has the connection with the mother again, strong connection with the woman from Anoia in a different way, the feeling of the mother crying for her kid and let the tears go to the other world and do, I'm sorry, I can't find the words very easy to say, but here's the feeling in the opposite direction, what I want to say with the lullaby, that which, gives the pleasure of music and put in the mood, the baby to sleep. But at the same time, to do that, you need to have really a baby there to put it to sleep. And in that way, Anne put a lot with her playing into the song. And the connection with I think Lullaby, it was has a big part of the name of the record, really, as the other songs. Και το μωρό μου θέλω το νάνι το μωρό μου και τα γέλο καμωτό μου και τα γέλο καμωτό μου πιο τσιριστού και θυμωθεί τσιμάνας του και θυμωθεί τσιμάνας του.
It's fascinating for me because I've spent a lot of time with Mother as a record, and it's been playing throughout my house, and I've just been listening to it. And now to finally get to see the lyric sheet it's sort of changed my relationship a bit with the music. Like, Jim, do you and George talk about the meanings behind these pieces ever?
The lyrical meaning, I don't understand Greek, so I want to know what they're about, but it's often like kind of a later thing after the music, I mean, I think maybe I mentioned this last time to you, like we had a song and like, hey George, let's do this song again, and we did it again, and but it sounded totally different, but it was the same song, are they the same words? And it's no, oh no, that's, and then he goes, oh no, that's the different words I sang that time. In that way, the song is separate from the lyrics in a way. I don't know. That's one thing I've learned from George, is how in Crete they think of it, you know what I mean? And it's an interesting thing about how the lyrics are often in the, I think for the Sator and the Cordelius, is that right, George? They're always in the format, right? Mm-hmm. With the couplets, with the syllables.
Yes.
So you can, so you can take these different lyrics and put them with it, So sometimes we get into a discussion about, because like two lyrics might have very different meanings, and so we talk about those choices,
Yeah, well, there's enormous amounts of transmission that's going on between them that is utterly, it's on that other frequency that some musicians, when they play together, they have, and those guys, they have it for sure. I mean, they can move things around, change things, shift things up, change tonality and approach and everything, and and a lot of times they use natural metaphors to talk about what they're doing, like, snowfall or, rain or wind and all of those things. I think they hear and play the music metaphorically a lot of the times in ways that I find very, very unique and interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can feel that too when Jim knows the words and even each word, but we're talking about, and I can feel it every time we're playing it. After we talk about, feels different to me.
I'm looking forward to the next record, to doing more recording.
Well, give me a break. No, what I want to say is that
Say give you a break.
no, you know, from mother, because I still into it, you know, and I want to have seat, you know, move to the next step. I mean, you know, I'm still on mother and waiting, but at the same time, in the same moment, I've got, you know, I'm thinking about the next one, and I've got ideas, and I can't wait, you know, come together again and start recording.
Right now, what I'm working on with them is they did a stand of 5 shows with Jonathan Richmond here in New York at this place called The Kitchen. So it was 5 nights of, which was an incredible experience to see both Jonathan Richmond and Xylouris White playing for 5 nights, and then seeing how they changed the material and how they approached the show. And so I've got live recordings from that I'm going through right now and listening through and mixing down. So that's the thing I'm working on for them right now.
You know, I really can't wait to start the next one again, because I think it's already started, really, because we've got a lot of material to work with, and at the same time new things, which I really can't wait to be with Jim and Guy again, talk about it.
For as long as they want to continue doing work with me, I'm always going to be available for whatever they want to do. It's one of the most, I kind of think, like, in my involvement in music or whatever, there's been a few really key kind of partnerships that I've had in my life, you know, like certainly playing with the guys in Fugazi, and for me playing with Vic Chestnut, and then working as a producer for these guys is definitely in that category of things where I consider them like the deepest kind of musical priority that I could have. And so for as long as they want to keep working, then I will always be available to do that. Certainly anytime they're in town, they'll probably come here and just track stuff at the house and just start shaping, you know, it's just a way of working or a way of collecting things without necessarily a full sense of where it's headed. But that's generally what happens. So I expect that will probably continue to happen.
Special thanks again to Guy, Jim, and George for being on this, the 400th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available on all iOS and Android platforms, and also on things like YouTube and Spotify and Audio Boom as well. If you can't find an episode you're looking for, if you wish to learn more about me or sign up for my regularly scheduled newsletter, please visit vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @VishCreative, or follow me @VishKhanna. You can listen to a radio show version of Creative Control on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time, around the world at CFRU.ca, or on an actual radio at 93.3 FM if you're in or near Guelph. Also, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. Thanks to everyone who's been pledging to the show. It means the world. And again, if I can send you something for your pledge, perhaps a Creative Control t-shirt or something else, let me know. Maybe we can figure something out. Send me a message at Patreon once you pledge, and we'll go from there. I'd like to thank again all the people who offer in-kind support of the show: Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, Planet of Sound in Toronto and Ottawa for sponsoring the show. Thanks to Jim Guthrie for letting me use the instrumental version of The Rest Is Yet to Come to end this show each and every week. Thanks to Annalisa at E1 Entertainment One Podcast Network. Thanks to the whole crew at CFRU for supporting me and the show, and thanks to you for listening to it and telling people about it, giving it a nice review, rating, downloading episodes. All that stuff is very helpful. So thank you. And 400, we hit 400. More to come. Here's to 400 more. That seems ambitious, but we'll keep going. We're just going to keep going. Thank you so much. I will talk to you soon. Goodbye for now.